Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as we broadcast live from West Virginia's beautiful Capitol Complex here in Charleston, West Virginia. We're very grateful to this huge crowd that has joined us as we get ready to prepare some information for the supplier, vendor, business community on how to do business with the state of West Virginia's government agencies. We're very excited, so let's go ahead and get started as we present our own version of this nitty-gritty of business with West Virginia. So our goals today are to answer several of these questions. For example, why does the state of West Virginia, with all its resources and employees, buy from the private sector in the first place? We're also, very importantly, we're going to get into some specific strategies for different business models. So whether you're a large company or a small company, we think that we have some strategies for you that could end up resulting in a successful state contract between your business and the state of West Virginia. One of the things I'm going to spend the most time on is how to find out what West Virginia's agencies need at any particular time. And that conversation is going to revolve around a publication called the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin, which is located within the vendor self-service portal on a website that we'll go into detail about. And once we talk about how you can find out what state agencies need, we're going to talk in depth about ways that you can continuously keep in touch with these bid opportunities through things like email alerts and the information that's constantly being put out on state of West Virginia websites. Now, very briefly, we're also going to talk about some of the requirements if you are a successful contract recipient with the state of West Virginia. However, the requirements that we're going to talk about are not relevant until you are a successful vendor. So the good news, and something that I'm going to emphasize several times, is there's no bureaucratic requirements for you to submit a bid to the state of West Virginia and make that offer for your goods and services. So you do not have, we're not going to throw paperwork or fees at you just in order to participate in the public procurement process. So let's start at the beginning with why does West Virginia buy from the private sector? In many cases, it is not cost effective or efficient for the state of West Virginia to manufacture everything it needs itself. So in the cases where we are putting commodities through the public procurement process, we've determined that it's most efficient for us to get those goods and services from the private sector. Now, when the state of West Virginia procures from the private sector, we primarily do so through a competitive bid process for the majority of what we need. For those of you who deal with other states, the language I would use, I would call West Virginia a single award state for most of our contracts. And in some cases, we join national cooperatives, but for the majority, the overwhelming majority of the time, we are going to buy everything we need through competitive bid and put that solicitation out ourselves. We want as many vendors participating in this process as we can get. It's best for the state when we have more vendors offering prices for all the things we need. And that bulk buying power of the state of West Virginia, when we harness the needs of all the agencies in our 55 counties, that's when we feel we get the best value for the goods and services we're procuring from the private sector. Now, another method where we utilize private sector resources is in a situation that we don't want to happen, but it occasionally does. In cases where there's life or property at stake, such as after a hurricane, during a flood, during some other unforeseen circumstance, state agencies will see themselves in an emergency situation where they are allowed to bypass the competitive bid process and go directly to the vendor community to solve the problem they have anytime life or property is at stake. So I mentioned that to all the vendors here because we don't want it to happen, but when agencies have an emergency, they may reach out to you directly. And in those cases, you want to make sure that you introduce yourself to these agencies so they know that you're on standby when these emergency situations occur. Now, for the most part, the state of West Virginia agencies will procure goods and services in accordance with a $50,000 threshold. And you may already be thinking whether or not your goods and services that you could potentially provide to the state of West Virginia would be over or under $50,000. Now, if you feel that your bread and butter, so to speak, with the state of West Virginia would be through transactions under $50,000, you can work directly with our individual agencies such as DOT, natural resources, etc. If something is expected to be over $50,000, then my agency, the West Virginia Purchasing Division, would be administering that solicitation on behalf of the agency. Now, the biggest difference for you at this stage, now the good thing is, in whether it's over or under $50,000, it's an opportunity for you to provide your goods and services to the state. The biggest difference in vendor action in this case would be if something's expected to be over $50,000, your offer would go directly to the West Virginia Purchasing Division. If you are bidding on something that is expected to be under $50,000, your bid would go directly to that state agency. So otherwise, no matter what the anticipated dollar value is, it's an opportunity for you to do business with the state. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that under $50,000 world. There is a list on our website of all the state procurement officers throughout our hundreds of agencies, and you can market yourself directly to those individuals so they know you're out there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that strategy. But the biggest takeaway here is over $50,000 comes to Purchasing Division, under $50,000 goes to the specific agency when you're submitting your bid. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about the under $50,000 world, because for many of you, your average transaction with the state of West Virginia would be within that threshold. When you are bidding on a low dollar amount, the extent to which you have to formalize your bid becomes less so. You know, it wouldn't be very efficient if we had you go through a lot of formal hoops for $1,000 order. So if an agency needs something between or under $5,000, they don't even have to bid it out. They can go directly to you and make the purchase. In the $5,000 to $20,000 world, they just need to call you and get a verbal bid. In the $20,000 to $50,000 world, you do need to submit your bid in writing, but the agencies have the authority to procure in this arena with fewer restrictions on how they would go about that transaction. Then, as we mentioned, over $50,000 is administered by the Purchasing Division. So let's talk about specific strategies for you to actually go through the process of securing a state contract. And I hope everybody is awake and caffeinated this morning. I'm still on my way to being as caffeinated as I want to be in order to bring the level of energy to this presentation that it deserves. So the most important piece of information that I'm going to deliver to you today is how to find out what the state of West Virginia's agencies need. And I want to make you very aware of a public document called the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. This is located within a very handy vendor portal on a website called wvoasis.gov. And when you go into the VSS portal at wvoasis.gov, you can click on a button that says View Published Solicitations and view the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin, which is going to tell you in live time what all of our agencies are trying to buy right now. You can create an account for your business entity in the vendor self-service portal, but you don't have to do that just to view the bulletin. Now, if you do choose to sign up in the vendor self-service portal, there's a lot of features that are at your disposal on that dashboard. Creating the account does not register you with any state agency, but when you make that user ID, you are able to save information about your company. So when you're getting ready to respond to a solicitation, your record is there, and you don't have to start from scratch when you're on the clock submitting your bid. Now, the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin includes solicitations expected to exceed $20,000, but if a state agency is procuring something very unique, or if they want to harness the advertising power of the bulletin, they may post a need there that is under $20,000. So it is a very robust publication with information that is continuously updated on everything our agencies are trying to buy in the 55 counties. Now, I'll emphasize a point that I made at the very beginning. You do not have to register with any state agency in order to respond to a solicitation in the bulletin or respond to an agency that is procuring something in that under $50,000 world. It would not be in the state's best interest if we created hoops for you to jump through just to give us your price for a particular commodity. So until you are a successful vendor for a contract or an order with a state agency, you don't have to go through any registration process. The only thing you would have to do is make that user ID if you wanted to respond online in the vendor self-service portal. Now, when you go into the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin to view published solicitations, this is what it looks like. And you can see in this particular screenshot, there are, you can view these project opportunities 5 at a time or so and scroll through the list of everything that is currently out for bid by our agencies. And hopefully the screenshot is big enough. The initial screen in the bulletin shows a brief description of the project, what agency has it out for bid, and how much time is left for you to respond. And these are ordered chronologically from the ones whose solicitation time is closest to farthest. Now, this is not the only information that you have to go on when you are considering whether or not you're going to respond, or when you're trying to find out if this is an opportunity that your business can provide. If you click on the blue link, that is the project number, that's going to take you to a more detailed page with attachments and part numbers and all the information you would need about this project. And I'll show you a little bit more about that momentarily. Another thing that I want to point out about this particular screen, I mentioned earlier that the state purchasing procedures are split up, or they differ somewhat based on whether or not something is expected to exceed $50,000. There is a way for you to see on this screen whether or not a solicitation is being procured in the under $50,000 world at the agency level, or at the over $50,000 world through my agency, the purchasing division. And that is, if you look at that third column, there's going to be a prefix on that project number. For example, ARFQ, CRFQ. If the prefix number starts with an A, it's being bid out at the agency delegated level. If it starts with a C, that means it's coming through central purchasing and on behalf of the agency and is expected to exceed $50,000. So right away, you can, just at that glance, you can see how big the project is anticipated to be. But again, at this stage, when you're just trying to find out what the state of West Virginia needs, you don't necessarily want to get, it's an opportunity for you either way. I'll put it that way. And if the last thing I'll point out about this screen, if you want to respond online and the agency is allowing it, and you're logged into the vendor self-service portal, you can click that blue respond button on the far right and begin your online response. Now, looking at the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin in order of the time left in a solicitation is not the only way for you to search that document. And we do not expect you to have the time in your week to read every posting in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin anyway. There is a way that you can search that publication by keyword based on whatever it is you're in business to do. And when you are searching the bulletin by keyword, I want to point out that it's not as instinctive as something like Google. And I encourage you to make your search terms as short as possible. For example, building maintenance, phone system. And just for you to ensure that you do not miss the way that an advertisement might be worded, if you put asterisks throughout your search terms in the way that I've done on this slide, that's going to allow you to cast the widest net possible into the purchasing bulletin and not miss out on a potential keyword match. So there are a few things that I will mention about this free account that you can create through the vendor self-service portal at wvoasis.gov. Our vendor dashboard is genuinely a powerful resource for you to take advantage of if you're interested in doing business with the state. Whether you have one now or whether you have a login ID that somebody else has created for your company that may be dormant, I want to encourage you to create this login and regularly check the opportunities that might be out there. Now, the vendor self-service sign-up does not register you with any state agency like the West Virginia Secretary of State or the purchasing division, but you don't have to register with any agency if you're just at the stage where you are looking for whether or not there is an opportunity for you in West Virginia government. You can create multiple logins for employees at your company. You are not limited to just one person accessing this portal on behalf of your company. And I encourage you to have several people that are able to check the vendor self-service portal in the event that somebody might be, let's say, on vacation for a week. You don't want to miss an opportunity that's out for bid. That might be something your company can provide. Now, I will mention that you can register with our agency, the purchasing division, through the vendor self-service portal. It's the only agency's registration that you can complete online in this fashion. If you want to register with the purchasing division, which is what makes you eligible to receive contracts from the state, there is some information we would have to have about your business entity, such as your federal tax identification number. And in some cases, there's a $125 fee that completes your registration. But I'll emphasize again that the registration fee is not required until you're the successful recipient of a state contract. So you can bid on solicitations and give agencies prices for your goods and services at an unlimited amount, and there are no fees involved. Now, some of the other highlights of the vendor self-service portal at wvoasis.gov. The left screenshot is what it looks like when you first sign into your account, and it shows you some of the basics that are on file for your business entity. But something I want to point out to you, which goes back to our goal of this strategy, which is making you aware of what the state of West Virginia's agencies need at any particular time, are the commodity-based email alerts for which you can sign up and receive from the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. And well, let me start here. So commodity codes, if you're not aware, is a global classification system that quantifies everything on Earth that can be manufactured. And I compare this to the old Dewey Decimal System that was in our school libraries growing up. Only there are hundreds of thousands of commodity codes out there that classify, what it is you're in business to produce or provide. When you create your vendor record in the VSS portal at wvoasis.gov, we want you to enter as many commodity codes as possible that describe what it is you can provide to West Virginia's agencies, because that's going to help us find you whenever one of our procurement officers has a need. And it's also going to begin enabling email alerts when something hits the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin that you've indicated through a commodity code that you can provide. Having these commodity codes on file in your record are going to start the process for those email alerts to link up with you. You can find the place to enter your commodity codes in this portal if you go to Edit My Account, like I've shown on the right screenshot. Click the Commodities tab, then there's a blue button that says Add Commodity/Service. And it's free for you to look up commodity codes, which I'll show you how to do here in a second. And it's free for you to add these to your permanent vendor record in this portal. And again, there's several benefits of this. It helps us find you when we need that particular good or service. And it also begins the process for those email alerts to be enabled, because we know you don't have time to read the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin every day. And if you have that extra hand working for you to make you aware of what we're putting out for bid, then it's just going to put more power in your hands so you can be aware and make the decision on whether or not you're going to pursue that opportunity with West Virginia. Now, what we're looking at here is a little bit more detail in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin for a particular solicitation. So this screenshot, and I'll even go back and show you how I got here. When we are first looking at solicitation opportunities in the bulletin within the VSS portal, I mentioned that you could get more details about any of these particular projects if you click the blue link that is the solicitation number there in the third column. As soon as I click that blue link, let's say the short description caught my eye, and I might be able to provide a particular truck or a particular HVAC system. When I click on that blue link, I'm taken to this page that is going to show all the information that's out there about this project. And at the moment in this screenshot, I'm looking at all the attachments that are included in that advertisement that I can download and review, so I know what it is the state needs and what I might be qualified to provide. The attachments are going to include things like part numbers, architectural diagrams, anything about the particular widget or service that the state needs the private sector to complete. There's also going to be things like terms and conditions here as well, but ultimately this is all the information that we're providing to the vendor community about the thing we need. So there should be no question about the specific good or service that we're trying to buy. It wouldn't be to our advantage if we were keeping you in the dark on that. And also within the details of any solicitation opportunity is going to be all the basics about the closing date, the contact person for who has it out for bid, which agency has it out for bid, and further descriptions of the project. Now let's talk about the very fascinating world of commodity codes. I know this is the part that everyone is on the edge of your seat for, but in all seriousness, having commodity codes in your vendor record is going to be the most likely way that we're going to find you in the private sector world. The library of commodity codes that is currently being used by the state of West Virginia is the UNSPSC system. That's from the United Nations. And before you go into your vendor portal and indicate the commodity codes that you can provide to the state, you can go to the website there at the bottom of the slide and search for commodity codes that are relevant to your business, and then copy and paste those codes into the Add Commodity section of your vendor record. And in the example that I've screenshot here, you can see on the left the main page that comes up when you go to that link. And then I've just put in a keyword search for the word bridge. And hopefully it is large enough for you to see. But when I put in bridge, for example, I get bridge software, bridge construction and repair, bridge painting, drawbridge. Again, there's hundreds of thousands of commodity codes out there that potentially describe what you do. And the state of West Virginia wants to know what those are by way of you entering those into your vendor self-service portal record. And that's the end of the first strategy that is going to let you know what the state is trying to buy. And just to put your mind at ease, I spend the most time on that strategy than all the others. So the other two strategies are going to go a little bit more quickly here. Now, the second strategy revolves around the under $50,000 world, where you can market yourself directly to state agencies and introduce yourself and what it is you can provide to them. Again, as we mentioned at the beginning, in the under $50,000 world, those transactions can be directly between you and the state agency with the need. So what I recommend to vendors in this situation is to send relevant procurement officers at the agency an introductory message saying who you are, where you are, and what you can provide, and simply request that the next time they have that need, whether it's routine or an emergency, keep you in mind and give you the opportunity to submit a bid. There can be a tremendous amount of business for you in this under $50,000 world based on the quantity of opportunities that you find out there with our agencies. And if you go to the website on this slide, there's a list of hundreds of procurement officers throughout the state of West Virginia that are in charge of purchasing for their corresponding agencies. And they are the people that you want to make sure know that you're out there, because otherwise the state of West Virginia does not have a way to know that you're in business or where you are or what you can provide to us. When you go to that link and you look at the list of the 100-some agencies in our 55 counties, there might be 6 or 8 agencies that jump out to you as agencies that could benefit from your goods or services. So I encourage you, at the very least, you don't necessarily have to email all several hundred procurement officers, but find 5, 6, 8 agencies that whose mission matches up to what it is you could provide to the state of West Virginia. and make sure that they know you're out there and you're eager to give them a price for anything they need. Now, when you are pursuing state business, there's additional information on my agency's website if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty and do your homework. In addition to the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin that we've talked about, as the method for you to know what the state currently needs, on the Purchasing Division website, we post bids received for anything that we are procuring on behalf of the agency. So in that over $50,000 world, right off of our main page, we post all vendor responses immediately after the bid opening. So if you are interested in providing something to the state, you can look and see what your competition looks like and who has submitted offers in the past the last time the state procured that commodity. And in addition, on our website, you can also see what vendors were successful through our notice of award reports. So there should not be any mystery to you, not just on what the state needs, but who has competed for it in the past and who was ultimately successful. Okay, the third strategy, and I promised you the second and third strategies didn't take up as much time as the first. The third strategy is a little bit longer term pursuit, but it's a potentially high yield opportunity. And this strategy revolves around something that we call statewide contracts. And a statewide contract is typically a single award contract where you are potentially the sole provider to all 55 counties for a particular commodity or service. Statewide contracts are where West Virginia truly harnesses the bulk buying power of all of our agencies, and for the most frequently procured goods or services, we will create a single award contract that all of our agencies are going to use for the life of that contract. There is a listing of all of our active statewide contract agreements on our website if you follow the link that's on the screen now. And last time I counted, there were, I want to say, between 70 or 80 statewide contracts for these most frequently procured commodities. Now, if you're in business to provide one of these commodities, and I'll show you what the statewide contract listing looks like. If you are a company that can provide things on this list like food items, fuel, automobiles, furniture, office supplies, etc. We can't add you to the statewide contract today, but I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the statewide contract listing. See when each relevant contract to you expires, and then consider in the amount of time you have before the current contract expires, start doing your homework. See when it's going to go out for bid again. See what the competition looked like when it was last advertised in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. It may be 6 or 8 months away, but you've got the opportunity to hit the mattresses and start researching and preparing for bidding on a statewide contract that could potentially see you as the sole supplier to the state of West Virginia for any of these particular commodities. Now, hopefully, within these three strategies, there's been at least one that in your mind you see as being a feasible route for your business entity to successfully receiving a state contract or a series of orders from any of our agencies in the 55 counties. Now, if you have found an opportunity and you are the successful bidder, you would need to register with the West Virginia Purchasing Division. and this is a program that I'm involved with, so I feel obligated to mention it. For you to be eligible to receive orders from the state of West Virginia over $5,000 in a year, you would need to provide us some information about your business entity and pay an annual fee of $125. But that is not required until you are getting ready to receive your very own state contract. And you do not have to pay that fee in order to bid. And some good news about that registration process and the annual fee, that $125 lets you do unlimited business with the state of West Virginia's agencies. It's not $125 per contract. It lets you receive any amount of orders from state agencies. And for those of you that do business in other states, currently West Virginia does not charge a percentage of the contract. The only fee is that $125, and then you can do unlimited business in the course of a year. The kind of information that we need to know about your company is pretty basic. We would need to know your legal name, your physical address, phone number, and your federal tax ID. And we'd like to have your DUNS number if that's possible, which is something you can look up for free on the Dun & Bradstreet website. Now, if you want to have a deeper conversation with our vendor outreach people at the purchasing division, there's a lot of information that we can send you by email or US mail. And we can also make an appointment to discuss a vendor outreach, vendor registration, and opportunities that might be out there specific to your business entity. And if you're local to the region, you can also make an in-person appointment here on West Virginia's amazing Capitol complex, where our offices are located in Building 15. Now, another program that is administered by my agency that I want to make you aware of is a 2-year certification you may be eligible for called Small Women and Minority-Owned Business Certification. And if you think you might be eligible to be designated as a small business, a women-owned business, or a minority-owned business, it is free to apply. And if you potentially receive West Virginia SWAM certification, there may be opportunities for you if a particular solicitation has a vendor preference, if you're SWAM certified, or even better, if you're a West Virginia business competing for public procurement opportunities in another state or with the federal government. There may be an opportunity if a state outside of West Virginia reciprocates West Virginia SWAM certification, they may give you a bidding preference that puts you on a competitive edge with in-state vendors in those other states. There may also be federal money associated with becoming a small women or minority-owned business. There's several ways in which SWAM certification could work for you, and we encourage you to look into that if you think that you might be eligible for any of those categories. If you are a West Virginia business and you found somebody that will reciprocate our certification and give you some sort of bid preference, we're happy to provide whatever documentation you need in order to show them that you are West Virginia SWAM certified. And we would love the success story. If a West Virginia company brought a contract home because of your SWAM certification, we'd love to help you with that, and we would love to know about that. And now I'm going to turn it over to one of my colleagues, Buyer Supervisor Mark Atkins. He is going to go into some detail about different contract types that the state of West Virginia awards and how each contract type requires something a little bit different from you. And he's also got some good information to present about conflict resolution, protests, and other details of the contracting world. So here, for a moment, I'm going to turn you over to Mark Atkins.
And this is Courtney again. I'll just pop in. Just a reminder that we are saving questions till the end. And if we don't have time for everybody's question, we will follow up by email or phone.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Mark, as already mentioned. So you got double marks here today. What I'm going to try to attempt to do, and we're very, very appreciative of all the respondents and all those who are on this webinar today. It's really encouraging that you are interested in doing business with the state of West Virginia. We, as Mark mentioned before, we don't produce anything. We need you guys to be the suppliers of our services and our commodities. And it's very difficult because I know many of you on this call or on this webinar are doing business not only with the state of West Virginia, but also with other states. And what the attempt here is today is just give you a broad overview of some of our acronyms. You know, purchasing in general loves acronyms. And what you may see here today as a RFQ may be the same thing as another state's ITB, which is often called an invitation to bid. So just trying to go at the highest level. And again, we have questions at the end, just kind of give you familiar with what you see when you get into that vendor self-service portal. So what we're going to start with is what our general golden rule of procurement is called an RFQ, a request for quotation. And as it's on the slides or just referenced, that will be awarded by criteria within the specifications, and it's going to go to the lowest responsible bidder meeting all the mandatory requirements. And that's why we use the word responsible bidder in our solicitations and in our code, is because you could be the lowest bidder, but you miss a mandatory requirement and you are disqualified. And you only have to miss one. So you can miss 1 or 100, but 1 is all that it takes. So in that RFQ, which is what we do 95 to probably even higher percentage of solicitations, it's going to be awarded to the lowest bidder, responsible bidder, meeting all the required specifications. Now, the difference is, and Mark alluded to this earlier, is when you see a C in front of that,
Okay, let's do another audio check real quick. Hopefully, okay, we're back. Go ahead.
okay, so we just pick up where I've left, or we?
If you just want to, it was just for a second. So
okay, great.
Go back.
Okay, great. What I was trying to reemphasize is that the C is for the central group, and it's for the larger dollar procurements, and the A is at the agency level. And in each of those documents, that when you see those numbers, those letters, you'll know basically who you're responding to. As we said again, the RFQ is the gold standard. It is the low bid meeting spec. And the ARFQ, it would be the agency level of that. And your responses would be considered or explained to you in the solicitation documents. And if you are going to respond through the vendor self-service portal or the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin, there'll be instructions on how to do that. All right, so we're just going to go quickly through the different types of solicitations that you may see in the vendor self-service portal. And we're going to start with the central version, which is here in our shop. And it's the CRFQ, and it is the low bid meeting spec. And the most encouraging thing that we can tell you is make sure you read all of the documents, all of them. That includes the instructions to bidders, which would have things like any mandatory pre-bid meetings. It also has when the bid opens, when the technical questions would be required, because we do accept questions on our solicitations. And it also tells you exactly what methods of response would be acceptable, such as electronically through the vendor self-service portal that Mark has been talking about, whether we receive a fax or where you want to put it to the snail mail, the U.S. Postal Service, or FedEx, or UPS, or if you'd like to actually drop it off in person here at the purchasing division. One thing that we have to emphasize, and we still sometimes have this tripped up, is electronic submission does not include emails. Absolutely, we will not be accepted for emails. And if you would make that mistake and accidentally email a response, you should get a very quick reply as, we do not accept those. Please look at the instructions of the bidders, and I am going to delete your email immediately. So, because we do not accept email solicitations, okay? Now, how do you get your documents from OASIS? As Mark said, you go into the vendor self-service portal, and that's where you're going to download the attachments. And now, one of the things, I haven't had this issue come up for about a year now, but we did have a situation where your vendors would go out and look at the solicitation and say, I can't find the attachments to download, so I don't know how to respond. And what was required at that time was to resize your browser window, because it was at the bottom and it wasn't showing. And once you resized or even scroll down, you could see where the attachments were living. So if you ever get in a situation where you can't find the attachments, I would recommend resizing the browser, because that worked in the past. Fortunately, I don't know if that was just a minor glitch at that time, but it was something I was getting about once a month. I haven't had it happen for over a year. So just in case you have any issues, there's also a help desk number that you can utilize if you need so, okay? But again, you're going to hear this over and over again. Read the instructions, read all the documents, because it is very important, and it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. But here's one question that we cannot answer you is, what do we need to return in the bid? That's a common question, is what documents do I need to send back? The only rule of thumb or guidance is, and this is just a common sense comment, not an official process, because again, we can't tell you how to structure your bid package, is that if you have to put a check mark on it, or if you have to sign it, or if it needs a date or any other type of input from you, including the pricing pages, that would be a very good, strong indication that you need to return that document with your bid. Okay, so if you have to manually do anything, I would, out of the abundance of caution, send in that document. Now, as far as, do we need all of the terms and conditions? Do we need another regurgitation of the specifications? No, we have those. But if there is a page within those documents that requires something on your part to complete, at least send in that document. That way you don't risk of any disqualifications or any issues that are with the your bid submission. We definitely are not here to disqualify based on technicalities, but that is part of the mandatory requirements. Yes, and if that specification also lists any other documents such as a license or some type of certification, absolutely, if it says required with the bid, please send that in. It's a very harsh process to have to disqualify somebody because a piece of paper wasn't returned. So please, again, you can't, the more time you spend on the upfront part of reading and understanding the documents, and you also have that ability to respond with a technical question that will be answered by addendum. So if you're not sure on something, especially if it's a requirement, you can ask the question and get a response that's shared with everybody that has the solicitation. But as far as asking us how to submit your bid or how to put it in there, we're going to refer you to the documents and tell you to read everything. Again, this is just a high level here. We have this technical question period. It will be identified. It will also when they have to be submitted and who you submit them to. Okay. And because of this, once these solicitations are published, we call it the blackout period here. It's in our Code of State Rules. It is a procurement requirement that you cannot have any communications with the agency. Okay, this is at the central level again. So that means that all of a sudden you said, Sally was great, communicating with me tremendously. we talked about it in our market research, but now she won't even return my phone call or she won't answer my email. Well, that's because her response is supposed to be send it to the buyer at the central purchasing division. They're not just all of a sudden just shunning you or avoiding you. It is a requirement by the Code of State rules that they cannot communicate to you because it's a rule of fair play, right? I tell you something and I didn't tell somebody else, and all of a sudden they feel like you have an unfair advantage. I've given an unfair advantage. So out of the abundance of caution and by the code and rule, blackout period applies. We also have all of these training modules on our website that are for our agencies, but guess what? It's out there available. If you want to see what the agencies are instructed, you can use those. The dashboard is tremendous on our website. Some more different types of solicitations. We have a solicitation that you may see with an acronym of a CRFP, but that's called a request for proposal. Again, some of these things are different terminologies in different states, but we call what the RFP is a best value procurement. And what that primarily is used for is when it's a large or difficult type of procurement where the agency either does not know exactly how to solve a problem or a situation that they want a resolution to, or that they have been doing it a certain way for a long time and they want to know if there's a better way to do it. So they would write a request for proposal, which is a much different set of procurement guidelines. It's not necessarily the best price anymore. It's the best solution, and it's going to entail two different parts of this response, and it's going to have a technical response and a separate cost response. It's indicated here, and it will be judged on a scoring model, and that model will be detailed and outlined by points within the RFP documents, and it will be and it will have certain requirements that you have to meet about how you submit that document. One of the main things is electronic submissions are absolutely prohibited, which means you cannot use the self-service portal. You would have to do the either by hand, by mail carrier, or fax. Okay, and that's all listed here. I'm not going to read the slide for you. You can do that. But you just got to make sure you remember on these RFPs, they're broad, they're bigger, they're usually very more complex, and they're looking for a solution, not necessarily the best priced model. And you will be notified when their cost opening is going to be occurred. So they often may even have, and it's not listed here, oral presentations where you can go in and even expand or further or explain further what your proposal is. So it's much more entailed. And so just when you see that RFP, just remember it's a best value procurement and it's going to be a little more involved and a little more process. Some other types of solicitations you may see advertised is called an expression of interest. And if you are not an architectural or an engineering firm or provide those services, you don't even have to open them up. I mean, you're welcome to do so, but it is for architectural and engineering services. And it's going to be similarly based as the RFP, but it's going to be based on your qualifications and experience. It's going to receive a ranking by a committee, and then you're going to be able to, the highest scoring of those based on your qualifications and experience and all the levels determined by that committee, the highest ranked vendor will enter into negotiations to get a contract. Okay, so if that contract is successful, it's done. If they cannot enter into successful negotiations, then they get to go to the next scoring. But it is solely for architectural and engineering services. You'll see both of these EOIs, these expression of interest in this architectural and engineering services, advertised as an agency level or as a central level. And each of those, again, will have certain requirements that you need to read through the documents. Now, these EOIs, again, for the best value procurement, are eligible for submitting through the vendor self-service portal. Unlike the RFP, the EOI, you can submit an electronic version through the OASIS portal. Another often very seldom used, but it's another tool in our toolbox is called an RFI, which is a request for information. You'll see that as a C-level document, a central request. And it's normally used when there is an initial need for the market research to reach out to the vendor community, and they're not honestly really sure who provides these services and how they're going to fulfill their need. So they'll do an official search, and it's going to be based again, a lot of this upon what Mark mentioned, your commodity codes that you have put in to your registration documents that will kind of select that vendor pool, and they're going to ask for it's a formal way of a market research. There will be no award. It is all informational only, and they're going to ask questions, and you're going to respond, and they're going to try to get enough information together to determine if they want to do a RFQ document, which is the low bid meeting spec, or would need a best value procurement and doing an RFP type of a document. But it's strictly informational, but it is an official way to gather information and try to get responses to the vendor pool, the vendor community, to help them solve a very complex or very often unique one-off type of procurement. Again, just trying to get you familiar with some of these acronyms so you don't get overwhelmed and say, oh, they never tell us what these things are. Now, most important part about this is you actually do identify solicitation and you want to submit a bid is what are we going to do? So we've got a little carefree notes here that tells you again, carefully review and read all the requirements that are met and that you are going to meet them successfully. Okay. And here's some things. If we do some construction work, those are under a subject of West Virginia Code 522, which is a completely different set of code that is applicable to all the state of West Virginia, and those particular procurements will require bonding and often sometimes bid bonds, performance bonds, material bonds, labor and performance bonds, and those require notary seals. The biggest issue we have with bonds, and most of these bonds will be secured after the successful bidder has been approached, but like a bid bond, required with the bid. Okay, if you do electronic bid, then you would be required to send that document separately after the bid would open. But if we can no longer read it or don't see the seal, we did get a little bit of a modification there since this has been done. But if it has a notary seal or has to be a bond, make sure that the dates that are signed and dated on the same date that the notary signed and dated them, because that is what the notary is attesting to, is that they did this in front of themselves. We do see some bonds come in with different dates and they have to be rejected. And so therefore, be careful with the dates. Read all the documents thoroughly and make sure that you comply with those. Make sure you review Section 8 of the General Terms and Conditions. All of our solicitations will have insurance requirements, okay? Everything in the state's going to be requiring now that we solicit to have commercial general liability insurance for commodities and services, and there may be some other requirements such as cybersecurity if it's a technical procurement, automobile insurance if you're going to be delivering in your vehicle or be on the state property at anywhere in the state locations. Those will be specifically identified. Now, here's the thing. Down here at the bottom bullet point, it said the state of West Virginia must be listed as additional insured. It is encouraged. Now, it's not a requirement. We are asking for proof of insurance unless the document has a specific instruction that we will be considered certificate holder, okay? But right now, all we are asking for is proof unless that new language is put in the requirements. But we do need proof of insurance, so make sure you read that section. Also, there's also a section in the terms and conditions about licensing. If we need any special licensings like your contractor's license, or we need certain type of certifications, those will be spelled out specifically in those general terms and conditions as well as often in the specifications. So again, we cannot encourage you enough. If you're willing to commit to a contract with the state of West Virginia, please read all of the documents and review them. It's very important. Again, If the solicitation requires a bid bond, it must be submitted with the bid. If you submit electronically, we are going to follow up with that requirement. It has to be, and what you submit electronically and copied must be legible, have to see that the dates are correct and that the seal is correct and can be read. So please make sure you get all of that stuff put in properly. Addendum acknowledgement forms, if there's an addendum, which is maybe a response to technical questions or we had to change something, you're going to get the universal acknowledgement, which is the addendum acknowledgement. We ask that you sign those and send them back with your solicitation. Again, also be sure that you get all of the licensing, certifications, and permitting that is required in Section 7 of the terms and conditions and in the solicitation documents. And drug-free workforce affidavit is one of those things, subcontractor list, just quite a few things that, again, you need to go through those documents. They seem to be lengthy, and they are, but there is a reason for every one of those requirements. Your bid submission. Now, if you're going to submit through the West Virginia OASIS portal, here's just a screen print of what it's going to look like when you open up, and you're going to add your attachments, the things that you feel that is pertinent to your solicitation response and also required to be submitted. You would attach those through that add attachments button. Again, bids must be received. This is an important one by the date and time that the bid opening is listed in the instructions to vendors submitting bids. We cannot and will not accept bids that are late after that time that is established within those instructions. And that's not just us being mean, that's in our West Virginia Code of State Rules, and that's referenced there for you. And also to be very considerate, and I think it's later on in here as well, if you are going to fax over a solicitation, every page of your document has to be received prior to that time that's established in there. For the purchasing division, we're always going to be at 1:30 p.m. That is a set time for the West Virginia Purchasing Division. It's never going to deviate from that 1:30 time. But if it comes in at 1:31 and you still have 1 or 2 pages left on a fax document, you are now a late bid and cannot be considered for an award. So faxing to me is the most, of all the things that we receive, that's the one I would choose as the last option. That would be my last option. That's just a personal bias. Bid openings, we have public bid openings here at the Central Purchasing Division. Every day you are welcome to participate. Come in. If you're submitting a bid, drop it off. Make sure you get that time stamped before you walk into that room. And at 1:30, you're welcome to watch the bids publicly opened in red. The agency version, they will have their instructions on exactly what time and what is available to you to respond to. We do not stipulate or mandate any particular time or process for the agency level. That is under their delegated authority. But please read all the documents and follow those instructions that are given for those as well. Meet those deadlines. Again, bid openings, centralized, we're going to be at 1:30. Make sure they're dropped off, faxed in, or whatever by the required date. That is going to be at time 1:30 of that day. Fax bids are considered complete, are not considered complete till the last page, as I mentioned before, transmits before that 1:30 p.m. It says Eastern Standard Time, but I guess we should say Eastern Time because now we're under daylight savings, so it should be EDT for now. But it's going to be 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, regardless of whatever we're under. If not, you're disqualified. Bid openings, follow the bid openings. We don't have a lot of people actually coming in anymore because we get a lot of electronic submissions for our bids. But even if you don't come in, we will publish your bid as well as any other bid that is received for that solicitation on our website. And normally it's the same day. If not, 24 to 48 hours is the guideline we give for some really large openings, like especially the RFPs where we have maybe large thousands of pages of documents submitted. But you can pretty much say that within 24 to 48 hours, all the bids that have been received for that solicitation will be at this email, this website address. So you can see what your competitors bid. Bid evaluations, all bids are evaluated to ensure that mandatory specifications are met. And if there's a specification that is not met, you'll be considered disqualified. And that is also based upon an evaluation submitted not only by the agency who has requested the products, goods, or services, but also with the recommendation to award and with the purchasing division buyer agreeing to that disqualification as well. And we do sign off on all of those. We take disqualifications more than extremely seriously, because we never want to disqualify a vendor or a provider from doing business with the state. But if you have missed a mandatory requirement and you did not ask a technical question that would release that requirement or modify that requirement, then you would be disqualified, and we would move on to the next lowest responsible bidder. Okay. Mandatory registration requirements. Again, we have certain things that every vendor that has to meet prior to an award of a contract. One is you cannot, without exception, unless you get, I should say, you have to be registered with the West Virginia Secretary of State's office unless they determine by your registration that you are an exempt from that. So there is exemptions sometimes made. I don't know the rules, but you either have to be compliant with Secretary of State or have an exemption certificate from the Secretary of State in order to receive a contract. You have to be compliant with the tax department, the insurance commission, workers' comp, and also completed through the purchasing division in order to receive an award. Okay, so there is certain requirements that everyone must pass in order to get a hold of contract. One thing that we do here at the central level, and it's also listed in our terms and conditions, is whenever you submit a bid and we do an award, we make every attempt that we possibly can to notify you by email, if you provide an email address, who the winner was of that award. Now, if you don't provide us with an email address, or if it's entered incorrectly, it is still your obligation to follow, because we also publish all awards on our website as well. Again, the dashboard has all of that information, but we make every attempt to provide with us an email address to notify you when an award has been made and when the contract has been encumbered. And once that happens, once you see that email, and if you're the successful bidder, you can immediately reach out to the agency now because the blackout period has ended. Or if you're an unsuccessful bidder and you have a question, you can then talk directly to the agency as well. The blackout period ends once you receive the notification of award. So then you can talk about anything you want with the bidder. We do not do purchasing debriefs here. We do not do solicitation debriefs. Sometimes we get a request when someone says, well, how come, or why didn't I, or why did this happen? We do not offer debriefs. We would refer you back to the agency for that discussion. Here we're going to talk a little bit about a protest procedure. And this is really important for you because there's two types of protests that we recognize here at the Central Division. And also, that is specifications. And that's where your technical questions are so important, and to know the dates that they're due. You could go into that solicitation and ask any question about the specifications, the terms and conditions, the delivery time frames, anything that you may have a question on that you would like to have further explanation. You would submit it during that technical question period, okay? But say that you still have a problem and you want and the question period is ended, you could officially notify the buyer that you want to protest the specification. Okay, it says to the purchasing director, but you would route that through the purchasing division buyer that's listed on solicitation. A protest of specifications, say you're indicating that the specifications are geared to one brand or one vendor, that you think it's not fair, or whatever reason you would like to protest that, has to be received 5 days prior to the bid opening. We have to have time to be able to evaluate your protest and make sure that it is truly substantiated and is correct, so that before the bid's open. because once the bid's open, the only other recourse you would have is to do a protest of the award, and that has to be submitted again to the buyer on record, to the purchasing director within 5 days after the award of the purchase order. So you have 5 days prior to the bid opening to submit a protest of specifications, and you have 5 days after an award has been made to protest the award based on some criteria or something that you feel is not correct in the award process. We do not take those personal. Don't think that you're just not going to say anything because you don't want us to get mad at you. We want to do the right thing. We want the right thing to happen. So if you do have a protest, you are welcome to offer that up. It's not something that's going to be held against you, but you need to know these dates, and you need to make sure that you are aware of these, because anything after the 5 days of specs or after the 5 days of an award does not have to be addressed. It's one of those, it would be subject to whether or not it's so, I don't want to get into the weeds, but you got to get those 5 days to make sure you get a response. After that, it's going to be looked at in a different set of priorities. Change orders to contracts. Anytime a contract is awarded, in order to make a change to that contract, it has to be done through an official version of the modification of the contract, which we call change orders. And that would also include things like renewals. If a lot of contracts have a set period of time, and then they have optional renewals upon mutual agreement, all of those things that you're committing to are listed in the terms and conditions. So if you're bidding for a 1 year with 3 1-year renewals, you need to be made aware of that. And that language would be listed there. They're necessary when it requires a change to the contract. And if there is a change to the contract, like in a construction contract, you need to do a change order because of an unforeseen event or a time frame problem or an issue that has prevailed itself, you are not to perform any work until that official change order has been approved. Again, Purchasing Division will send all centralized change orders through the C document, and the agency will send any change order through their A-level documents. The change orders to the contract are required in order for any additional work or anything to be done. And this screen here just again reminds you that there's an AMA, which is a master agreement. AMA is an agency agreement for goods and services that are without a specific number, that requires a release order, delivery order, in order to get the product or services. An APO is a spot purchase, and that would be a definite number or any type of thing that would say, I need 10 of these, I need 15 of these. An AMA would say, I may need 1 or 100, and I'll tell you when I need them. So that master level agreement and that PO agreement is 2 different orders. One is a multiple open end, and the other one is a spot purchase. So if you see those coming, if you see a PO or an MA at the end of the documents, an MA is going to tell you that, hey, they're going to buy multiple times, no set of quantity at need, and the PO is going to be more of a spot purchase. I need 10 of these. Send them to me. Your process basically the same. CMA, CPOs, again, they come here, they're going to be prepared by the agency, and we basically go through the process of all the change orders, approvals, encumbrances, when to tell you when to start the work. It's just the document in the front either come from the agency side or the central side. But any of you who've already had contracts, you're probably very familiar with these terms. Okay, and again, anything that comes through us, we do have to have AG's approval as to form. So we do have that extra layer of review that always happens when higher dollar purchases are involved. Things to remember: we cannot accept late bids. Formal acquisitions, you cannot communicate with agencies on a specific solicitation. Okay, that means if you hold multiple contracts and you're just bidding on this contract, you can talk to your agency on your other contracts. And I know it's human nature to say, hey, have you heard anything about the one that I'm bidding on? The proper response is don't even ask them. But first course of action is don't even ask, but if you do, their proper response is, I can't talk to you about that one. You need to go to the purchasing buyer. But on any other contract you hold, and that's where a lot of agencies get a little scared. Like, oh, I've got this vendor on 3 different contracts, but we're bidding out something else, and I'm sure they're going to bid on it. They can talk to you about the current contract, just not about the one that's out to bid. Questions have to be submitted in writing to the purchasing division buyer. Blackout period begins once you see it published. Once you got a notification that there is an opportunity to bid, that blackout period has begun. You're encouraged to submit all the required documents. Again, we can't tell you what to submit. If the solicitation would say with the bid or prior to award, but if you have to fill it out, if it says send this certificate, do that with your bid. Make sure you take the time to review all the terms and conditions. They're both mostly identical, but we do have a separate set for central and a separate set for the agency that have just a few little differences in terminology or language. Just get yourself familiar with both. If you see the A-level document, that's an agency terms condition. If you see a C, that comes from the central purchasing division. It's very important. Vendor performance. Here is where we really need to start tightening up. You've got the contract, and now you're here to perform that contract. If it's over $1 million, you're going to have a post-award conference with your agency to make sure you go through and know everybody's on the same page. But if it's under that, you're going to be responsible to fulfill the obligations of the contract. Be sure you have a good open line of communication with the agency and the products that you're providing. If there's any issue and a delay for an unseen circumstance, or some type of public awareness or emergency is developed and it's interrupted supply chain lines, you need to make that communicated as quickly as possible to the agency. The true statement is the biggest problem we ever encounter is a failure to communicate. So if we can keep the open lines of communication, that is very, very helpful. If you become considered a non-responsive or an unresponsive provider of a contract, you are breaching the contract. And here's where we can get some vendor performance issues, and the agency should make multiple attempts to rectify the situation or resolve the situation with you. They should tell you exactly what they want to have resolved and how to get this past this. But if that issues have failed, then they would send you what we call a WV82 vendor performance document that you would have to respond to. And then based upon that response, if they would then have to send it to us to get involved, then you could be deemed an unresponsive bidder, which could result in cancellation of that contract, which could result in even sanctions against your company, where that could limit your ability to participate in future solicitations, and could even cause your company to become disbarred for a very egregious breach of contract, which would then not permit you to do business with any, I'm going to say that a third time, any government agency inside the state of West Virginia. That means political subdivisions, cities, municipalities. If you become a debarred vendor, you are basically out of the state of West Virginia. And most states check other states' debarments, including the federal government. And if you get debarred in one state, often it will carry over to other states, and you can basically shut down your ability to do business with a government agency. So it's better to jump in and resolve the issues up front, as opposed to just trying to kick them down the road and then, get into a very unfavorable situation. The agency wants you to perform. We want you to perform, and we hope that it's a profitable enough contract that you're able to employ people and provide that performance. The last thing we ever want to do is get into a confrontation with a vendor. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens. Okay, so there is a vendor performance issue part to any contract, and there are formal procedures in dealing with those. And let's just hope we don't ever have to go there. Okay, before you get into that situation, talk to your agency, talk to your the contracted agency, and see if there's somewhere that we can have a peaceful and meaningful conversation in order to get through this. Okay, here's some quick references of where you can find everything. Again, Mark's probably had all of these in his as well. You got the procurement officer listing that you mentioned if you need to know who is the primary and the backup for any agency. We have all the contracts that we award at this location. We have division transparency. We have the bids on these locations. If you want to see any of this information, the dashboard is it's expanded so much in the last 4 to 5 years. When I first came here, it was vague and sparse. It's got more information on there than I could ever comprehend in my little brain. Lastly here, 3 recommendations, utilize one or more. Oh, that's yours, isn't it? No. I did my part. Hey, thank you very much for your time.
Mark's going to wrap it up here, and then we will take questions. And those questions we don't have time for, we will get back to you.
Okay, let's take it home, everybody. Okay, just to bring all this to a conclusion, the 3 strategies that we outlined at the beginning of the presentation, hopefully one or more of these strategies has sparked ideas that you can put your heads together at your companies and see that as a viable path to receiving a state contract. Read and search the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin as regularly as you can. Sign up for those email alerts, get your commodity codes on file so we can find you, and so email alerts hopefully go to you. If you think the under $50,000 arena is going to be your bread and butter, market yourself directly, introduce yourselves to relevant agencies whose contact information we have provided on our website, and let them know who you are, where you are, and what you can provide, whether it's in a routine circumstance or an emergency circumstance. And then if you think you can be a supplier for the most commonly procured goods and services in the state of West Virginia, research statewide contract opportunities for that longer term but higher yield pursuit that we outlined in the 3rd strategy. Learn what state agencies need through the bulletin, through all the tools and power that is harnessed for you in the vendor self-service portal. Please get your commodity codes entered into your record. The purchasing division is currently in the process of training procurement officers statewide to look for you based on the commodity codes you have entered into your VSS record. So this is going to be how we essentially Google you and find the suppliers we need to provide certain things. Make sure you stay up to date with our procurement officer contact listing that is on our website. Introduce yourself, use those contact people to make our agencies aware that you're out there. And a lot of this information and a lot of information for beginning, intermediate, and expert level vendors is available in the vendor registration section on my agency's main page, wvpurchasing.gov. And then if you think you are going to be in a position where you will be receiving orders or contracts from our agencies, keep your vendor registration up to date, and also look into opportunities in our SWAM certification program to see if you could benefit from that potential reciprocity with other government entities. The contact information, we can email Mark Atkins information to you, but also myself and Carol Hudnall in our vendor outreach office. We can certainly answer questions after this and be a long-term resource for you. And as I mentioned in my section, we can have a one-on-one conversation about your business and potential opportunities that are out there, or you can make an appointment if you're in this area to sit down and talk with us here at Building 15 on West Virginia's Capitol Complex. And now I am going to turn this over to our moderator, who's going to take us through a Q&A period. And these are questions that are open to both myself and Mark Atkins.
And if anybody does have to jump off, these will be recorded and posted on our Vendor Resource Center within the next week or so. So, and yes, we will a question just came in about could the questions and answers be shared with attendees via email? Yes, we can do that. So let's go ahead and we will answer them, the questions as they came in. Is an ARFQ usually higher or lower than that threshold? And that was on the slide talking about the 50,000. Over here, please.
An ARFQ, if you can hear me, is based upon, and I think I know where this question's coming from. Some agencies now have a spend threshold limit up to $100,000. Okay, so anything, if that agency has been designated, and those agencies are on our website as well, anything that is estimated to be $100,000 or less would come as an ARFQ document. Anything over the anticipated market research would indicate over $100,000 would come centrally. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't see a CRFQ come in and your bid is only $29,000, because there's some other factors that come into play, and I didn't want to get into the weeds on it, but because of those spend thresholds, they may have bought same or similar items within the last 12 months that would come up to or breach that actual spending threshold, and that would require them, even though it's well under that spend amount, require them by code to send it to the central division and make it a central purchase, even though it's going to be well below their agency delegated authority. So there are different things that come in on the backside of the agency level. It may be the fact that they've already bought enough of those items that they need to make it a higher level document. And you say, well, there's no way that this is over $100,000. Well, there's a reason why they sent it to us. But normally anything under 50 or those agencies that have 100 would always be an A-level document. And as Mark mentioned before, anything under $5,000, we encourage 3 bids, but are not required. And anything from $5,000 to $20,000 has to have at least 3 verbal bids, okay? And even if no bid, it's considered a verbal bid. So after that $20,000 mark is when you start seeing these solicitations published in the West Virginia Self-Service Board. And the book we call it the purchasing board. I hope that answered it.
And if we do have any questions that come in that are going to take like more than, that aren't a brief answer, we'll get back to you on those too. So the second question is, if a contract for services is under $5,000, is a WV-48 required?
The WV-48, if you hit me with, we've got
like get back to you
so many different forms, but I think the WV-48 is for the agency to do verbal bids. Is it required? That would be more of an agency level procedure. We usually make a lot of these documents available for speed and ease for documentation of their file. But if that's the verbal bid form, it wouldn't be required from us, but in their internal policy may be a requirement.
Okay, next question. I own a 24/7 courier service. Are those services needed by the state?
I would encourage anybody with a business like that to introduce yourself to the agency procurement officers. This is Mark Totten, by the way. When I came to state purchasing, I had no idea the depth of services that were needed by our state agencies. I had no idea how many state agencies there were until I came to state government. So there are, even 17 years into my state government work life, there are still things that surprise me that are procured on a regular basis. I would absolutely encourage you to make your services to the attention of the state agencies.
Can I jump in here on that one? Because Mark over here, he's the expert on the commodity codes, okay? If that's a great question. A courier service, it would be very important for you to make sure you register in OASIS with the correct commodity code, so that when or if there is a need for a courier service, you would get that notification. So by all means, make sure you get that commodity code, go into the UNSPEC, and make sure you get as much as you can in there, so that if somebody solicits for that, you would get that notification.
And on that note, where can you find a complete list of the commodity codes?
So the complete list of the commodity codes, and I'm going to jump back to the slide that had that link. There is a website where they are searchable by keyword. The example that I used was bridge. And give me just one moment and I'll get us back to that link. Because I definitely want you to have this web link because there we go. So that web link right there at the bottom of that, in that last bullet point, is where you can search for commodity codes that are relevant to your business.
Let's use that. That's a great example because everybody uses different terminologies. We're going to use the courier question, okay? If you have a courier service, I would not only search for courier on the UN spec code, but I'd also search for words like delivery and other type of words because we may be asking for a delivery service and you're looking for courier service. And to us, it would be equate to the same thing because it's subjective to the guy that's doing or the person that's doing the solicitation. And I would, without muddying the waters, I would never go drill down to all of the 8-digit codes. I would drill down to the top 4 or even top 6 of those numbers and put zeros in the rest because in our procurement world, if you have a 8-digit number, the UN spec code number, it's got to match to the exact number. Whereas opposed, if you put zeros after the first 4 or 6, it will take anything, any number sequence after that. So you might see things, and I'm going to use the example, you sell copy paper. If you find the paper commodity code that drills down the copy paper, if you back up 2 numbers, it might be it might be toilet paper. That's paper, 2 different types, and you don't supply that. But I would rather look at a solicitation to determine it's not for me than to be so specific that I lose an opportunity. So yes, you're going to get more. I may put out an order for toilet paper, and you go, why am I getting this? I would rather get that as opposed to I went down to copy paper and you've even drilled down to 11 by 14 and we're looking for 8.5 by 11. If it goes that granular, just to get a broader net, as Mark says, always cast a broader net.
Mark made a really good point about the terminology you use when searching the commodity code website. Just last week, I had a conversation with a state agency that was trying to find a commodity code for shipping services. And it was actually listed, I believe, under freight. So even though if you don't find a relevant commodity code based on the first descriptor you use, think of a synonym. It may be in the catalog under a synonym of what you initially think it would be under.
The next question. Currently, our prices for technology help are fixed. Is this changing moving forward?
Currently, the prices for technology are fixed.
Help are fixed, yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the solicitations are our terms and conditions, the gold standard of an RFQ is firm fixed pricing for the life of the contract, whether it be a 3-month, 6-month, 1 year, and renewals or 5-year. If there are opportunities for pricing changes, it would have to be listed and solicited in the documents. For example, some agencies may want to buy some technology that comes in either 1 year or 3-year blocks for those licenses. They should be soliciting accordingly based upon that market research. But if they want to do a renewal, they may say you have an opportunity to increase your price, but they would have to have that in the solicitation with an evaluatable price at the end of the document. So in other words, you're going to see a price for the first year, and then you get an opportunity to change the price for the 2nd year, 3rd year, or 5-year, whatever. That would be a total evaluation. We discourage those models because we would rather lock in at a fixed rate for the life of the contract. And if it becomes a model that's not sustainable, then we probably need to finish the life of that contract the 1st year or 3rd year, and then resolicit again if there's a pricing change. But pricing is going to be identified as firm fixed unless otherwise specified in the documents.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about the $125 fee. That's a yearly fee, right?
Sure. Question about the $125 vendor registration fee, which is not required unless you are the successful recipient of over $5,000 worth of state contracts total in the course of 1 year. The $125 fee is not going to be required year after year unless you continue to receive contracts from state or West Virginia agencies exceeding the $5,000 aggregate threshold. So, but the fee is not in no state registration is required for you just to bid or just to market yourself to an agency. Whether we're talking about registration for purchasing division, Secretary of State, etc., that is not required unless you are about to be the successful recipient of an order or a contract. And if that doesn't answer the question, just let me know.
Well, I'm going to also throw in here because I've had this question before. Once you pay the $125, you can hold multiple contracts. You don't pay per contract. You have one fee that makes you eligible for 1 or 100 contracts for that entire year. So you don't say, well, I won this one, I got to pay $125, now I won another one, I pay $125. It is specifically to your vendor VCUS number, vendor customer number, based on a 1 year. And I'm stepping on Mark's toes here because that's his expertise. But don't think you have to pay it for every contract. It's a one-time fee for that year, and you can hold as many contracts as you can.
Okay, next question. Can you explain the service area section on Oasis? Mine is blank, and when I try to add service area, there's no way to add anything.
The service area section in your self-service portal has to do with what regions in West Virginia you are able to service. You can put in, I want to say it's by county. Let's say that you deliver gravel and you're only able to deliver gravel to the 12 most southern counties of West Virginia. You can indicate that in that section of the vendor self-service portal. Now, if your good or service is transportable anywhere in the state of West Virginia, you don't have to have anything in your service area because you have no restrictions on what your potential service area would be to West Virginia's agencies in the 55 counties.
Okay, next question is, similar to statewide contracts, can we see when other contracts expire that are not statewide?
So other than statewide contracts, if you go to the main page for my agency, wvpurchasing.gov, there's a button that says awarded contracts. And when you look at the specific contract documents that are posted under awarded contracts, you'll see the expiration date for those as well. So even if it's a one-time purchase, if you see it on the awarded contract page, the expiration for that contract is going to be there.
I got a question, and I should probably know this. How long do those stay on our website? Do we have a drop-off date?
We keep those on about 90 days.
Okay, next question. Mark, we did have a question about how to make an appointment to discuss opportunities. Mark, his contact information is there. We talked about that. So the next question is, do you need to hold a West Virginia business license to be a qualified vendor?
You do not have to have a business license to register with purchasing division, but I believe that is part of the Secretary of State's registration. But
Okay.
you can do that in either order.
Any status on the technical temporary staffing services procurement?
Say that again.
Any status on the technical temporary staffing services procurement, CRFQ, MIS 25?
That's an agency document.
That's
not a
so
state.
CRFQ, okay.
Well, it's not a state. I mean,
Oh, it's not a state, okay. Okay, yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that one.
You need to reach out to the buyer.
Does a service disabled veteran owned small business qualify as a minority business with West Virginia?
That would not qualify as a minority business, but I think I heard small business in there. And if you meet the criteria of small business based on the way we define it in the SWAM program, which I can provide that definition to you, then that the small business category would earn you the entire SWAM certification. There's no tiers to the SWAM certification certificate that we give, whether you are meet the eligibility requirements in one or all three of the state categories, you would still potentially be eligible for SWAM certification. But I do think I heard the word small in that question.
We are a promotional product company. Our service is mainly under $5,000. How can I find out which department will use our service?
So I would say that the same thing that I told the courier supplier. A few things. Look at the state agency procurement officer listing on our website for contact information for all of the state agencies in the 55 counties. Come up with an introductory letter for them saying who you are, where you are, and what you can provide. And also make that vendor self-service record and enter commodity codes for promotional product, whatever the UNSPSC definition of that is. That's going to, the introductions you make to state agencies are going to be especially valuable if you think that your average transaction is going to be under $5,000, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, does not even require bidding. So if they don't know that you're out there willing to provide promotional products, then they won't be able to find you. But the second way for them to find you is for you to enter those commodity codes describing your business. And if that doesn't answer your question, please let us know.
Next one, I monitor VSS daily. We offer a very unique product line, biometric software. How can we take a more proactive approach, share our offerings with the state agencies so they know those types of resources are available, especially for small business? Can there be a vendor day, or is there a process for companies to submit their capabilities? Mark touched on this a little bit, but regarding the vendor day, we are talking about some outreach opportunities over the next few weeks. So and we'll post those on our website when those are nailed down. But Mark, is there anything else you want to?
I would say the same answer. Make sure for the biometric services, make sure you have commodity codes in your vendor self-service record that reflect that service, and introduce yourselves to the relevant agencies on our listing on our website, and make sure they know that you're out there and what you provide.
Is proof of insurance bonding required for a paint supplier?
No. Yeah. This is Frank Whitaker. I'm the silent partner in the room, apparently. For paint suppliers, that would be no different than any other product supplier. Now, if you are a construction company who is doing painting projects that are going to be over $25,000, then the normal bonding requirements would exist. And I think they probably mentioned earlier that as far as insurance goes, if you're supplying goods or services to the state of West Virginia, we're going to have minimum insurance requirements. Did I hit all the points they asked? Okay.
Okay, next question was when he was talking about protests, does 5 calendar days mean calendar or business days?
Honestly, I would have to go back and look at how it reads. My first initial thought would be calendar days, because that's always consistent for everybody. Because working days for the state sometimes is different than working days for the private sector where you guys live. But I know on the specifications, I just don't want to say. We can follow up with that.
Yeah, we'll look it up and send it out.
You just stumped me because I don't want to tell you wrong. If you err on caution, do the calendar days.
Yeah.
Okay, this person needs some clarification. 5 days prior to the bid opening, we have to protest specs, but we haven't seen the details until it's open.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have 2 protest processes. We have protest of spec and protest of the award. Protest of spec says, I received your solicitation, state of West Virginia, agency, whatever, and I think this spec is flawed because, and you protest that spec. In theory, nobody's responded yet. We haven't opened bids. You just see an issue or an error with that spec that you would like to see resolved. That would be a protest of specification. Now, if you're protesting the award, so we go all the way through the process, we award a contract, and your entity believes we have misawarded for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you believe the successful vendor missed a mandatory specification, and therefore you think they're not subject for that award. That's a protest of award, and we would certainly take those on as well. Now, there's a little bit of a like dead man gap in there, right? Let's say specs were not protested, but the award has not been made yet. And let's say you go onto our portal and you look at your competitor's bid and you see that he missed a mandatory specification and his price was less than yours. We occasionally get a protest on that. That's not technically protestable because it's after the bid opening, but before the award. If you saw it, we probably saw it too, and that vendor likely would be disqualified or whatever. So you would have to wait until that award and then submit your protest, because we don't know who's going to be awarded to until that is finalized. So there is that one window between protest of spec and protest of award where it's kind of a wait and see. But certainly we take protests seriously, and we have very few of those. I don't know if Mark touched on that earlier, because we try to write good specifications, and our agencies do, and we try to give the vendor community a good voice. Protest to specs, we don't get a lot of those, because usually if there's an error in the specification, a vendor will reach out during the technical question period, ask the question, and then that gives us, the state, the opportunity to resolve that error or that question. But let's say you do question the spec, the state doesn't change it for whatever, and you still feel like it's an invalid spec for whatever reason. That's the time to protest. You're like, I asked the question, they didn't resolve it. I think it's still an issue. I believe it's a problem. I want to submit a protest. And the important thing to know is we don't mind protests. Like, I'll have, vendors say, I'm so sorry to protest. I hope this doesn't give me a black eye. We welcome protests. What we want is a competitive bid product that is successful and awardable. So if there's a problem in it, we need to know whether it's protest of award or protest of a spec. So don't ever feel like you're going to, be categorized a certain way if you protest. We don't mind protests at all. Like I said, we have very few protests, and we resolve those quickly in almost all cases.
Okay, next question. If an agency has difficulty timely and correctly submitting vendor invoices for payment, is there a person or contact the vendor can contact to assist the process?
If an agency is not submitting invoices on time,
For payment, I think is what you're getting at.
ultimately the agency is responsible for payment.
We here at the purchasing division, and probably even the procurement people within the agency, unless it's a tiny little agency, generally payment and procurement are separated. Unless it's a very small shop, very rarely is the same person paying the bill that makes the purchase. Same thing, we enter into the contract on behalf of the agency. When that contract is complete and it's got a bow on it, we no longer are involved in that contract. We don't know when you deliver goods and services. We don't know when you submit invoices or when they submit those invoices for payment. I know most agencies try to pay promptly. Sometimes there's an error in the invoicing. Sometimes there's an error on the agency side. But I would start with whoever your contact is at the agency. And I would say probably the contact that you're working with after the contract is awarded. Like I said, we work with the procurement person that creates that contract, but usually you're working with an end user. If you're doing kitchen supplies, you're working with the manager of that facility, probably, not the procurement officer. So start with them, and then if you need to escalate, I would try to escalate up their chain of command. And if they tell you it's at the auditor's office, there's a problem at the auditor's office, I don't think there's any harm in contacting the auditor. But we generally don't have any vision into payment or any ability to move payments one way or the other.
I would say the procurement officers on the website can also be points of contact.
Oh, absolutely.
And I would like to add this. This is something we all are aware of, but we really don't have any way to notify or discuss, your invoicing does have to match how the contract is set up. If it's set up for eaches or service amounts, your invoice has to match the price that's on the contract. And if you do multiple SKUs to create, and I'm going to use our computer contract, you have 15 different items that make up this custom computer, and it's priced at $1,100. You can't do all of the SKUs and make it add up to $1,100. You would then have to redo your invoice and say, you may have 15 SKUs, but the price is $1,100.
Yeah,
Quantity
of
one for $1,100. So and the further that even along, if it's going to go through the process of getting an electronic funds transfer or even possibly a check from the auditor's office, you're invoicing the contract name on the front of the contract that you receive. Your invoice has to be jot and tittle, even down to periods and commas, exactly like that contract. So if it says incorporated spelled out on your invoice, but you're contracted under INC period, you're going to have to change your invoice to INC period. You have to do it manually. That may speed things along for you that way.
Okay, next question. Can agencies share with vendors that an RFP is coming?
In their market research, that would be a good
Absolutely.
indication.
Yes.
Up until it becomes an official solicitation, when they submit it to the purchasing division, the blackout period comes.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to know when they submit it to us, because we may be working on the specifications together from that point. But once they send it to us and you reach out to them, they should be able to identify, I'm sorry, I'm no longer able to speak with you on this. We're in the blackout period. Please refer any questions to, and they'll name the buyer that's going to handle it.
Yeah.
But up until it hits the street where you can actually see it, then you know for sure that's in the blackout period. But it could be that lapse of time that you're not aware of that's been submitted to our shop. Then it is in a blackout period for that agency. They would then have to inform you of that and to respect that information. But there is a kind of a silent period that you wouldn't be made aware.
Yeah.
That's when I said you may feel like you're being shunned or you're not being acknowledged anymore. When they were so talkative before, they just need to tell you we're in a blackout period, and hopefully you would understand what that means now.
And usually the next sentence is, contact the purchasing division my buyer is.
Yes.
But what they won't tell you is it's 15 days out, or we expect it to publish tomorrow or the day after. They should share nothing like that. It should literally be, we're currently in a blackout period, contact the buyer and they can give you that name. And that should be the end of their contact. And that should be the end of your contact, because we've had agencies reach out to vendors who are savvy enough to know they shouldn't be talking because, maybe the end user at the agency doesn't know that that's a problem or has forgotten or isn't thinking correctly. And it can be a really big deal on a procurement. It can cause a vendor to not be eligible for an award. It can cause the entire solicitation to be pulled down, reestablished, resolicited, which then slows the agency down on getting their goods and services, slows the vendor down on being able to get to work. So it's a very big deal and it's taken very seriously. So if you know it should be in a blackout period and they're talking, you should probably say, you know what, I'll ask the purchasing division, or, I'm glad to talk to you about this after bids open or after the award or whatever. So there's no harm in policing it on both ends.
I think Mark's pretty much covered this one, but I do want to address it. Are there any business opportunities for bad debt collection agencies or any type of delinquent accounts or sectors?
We actually have a contract for debt collection. We have a statewide contract for debt collection. It's a multiple award contract. I think we have 6 or 7 vendors on there, and that's bid out we bid it out, and we have 1 year with 3-year renewals. If any vendor would choose not to mutually renew, if we had enough of those, we could go out earlier than what we anticipate. But there is a debt contract on statewide contracts for collection, for debt collection, for taxes, universities, and all that stuff. So we do have that contract.
What do we do if an agency contacts us directly and the job is going to be over $50,000? Will the agency need to put that job out for bid?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of answers there. Some agencies will have more than a $50,000 delegated limit. There are agencies that are exempt from the purchasing division's overview as described in 5A3. So there are some agencies that may do business at over $50,000. You know, the important thing is when an agency is doing their market research and they're talking to you and they're saying, hey, we're looking at bidding this. Now, what agencies don't do is share their budget, right? And they should not share their budget with the vendor community. But if in your conversation, you're like, you know, anybody can do this less than $250,000. And they're like, oh, it would be up to the agency to then modify their specifications and go out to bid otherwise. So, you know, they really shouldn't be discussing their budget with you, but as part of their market research, they should be able to determine whatever this goods or services might cost.
Just talking about the water any further, which is the exempt agencies. That exemption may be from 5A3 West Virginia Code, which is agencies that are under 5A3 come to the Central Purchasing Division. An exempt agency, for example, would be like the Division of Corrections. They can solicit under their purchasing guidelines, and they may be able to talk to you about $10 million procurement. But if it's coming through 5A3, the agencies, that's when those would come into play. So there is, and it's confusing for you, it's confusing for us sometimes. So if they contact you, you just got to go to it under the assumption they are doing it under the correct thing. Don't not business. They'll figure it out.
Okay. Do your RFPs always have a SWAM requirement?
I don't understand the question. There's not a requirement. I mean, if you are a SWAM vendor, you can definitely identify that in your response. But as far as a requirement, nothing I'm aware of.
Okay. This one might be more of a longer conversation. Our commodity never comes out for bid. Agencies always state they must file for statewide contract. Those vendors provide a wider breadth of products where we are specific, and a manufacturer that would save the state a lot of money looking for guidance.
So if there's an existing statewide contract, that's going to be for specific catalog items. If there's something that you provide that's more specific and not in the statewide contract catalog for what is posted on our website, then there may still be an opportunity if an agency needs the specific version of it that you provide.
Okay, we got 5 more questions, so we'll get through those. For everybody still hanging on here. For a procurement that required proposals to be submitted in hard copy, will notification of award be sent to all submitting vendors via email or posted on Oasis?
Well, I'm going to assume that you're talking about an RFP, which we don't allow electronic submissions, so it kind of we call that a hard copy. Yes, if the terms and conditions that go out will tell you that if you provide an email, we will do our best to notify you back.
So it'll be notification will be both places, same as any other solicitation.
Yes.
If we have your contact information and you bid, we'll notify you. And if and that of course award will be posted to WV Oasis. The award will be posted, just the bidding documents will not be posted on the incoming.
How does the vendor arrange to get set up for ACH payments?
ACH payment is set up between the vendor and the West Virginia State Auditor's Office. Because of the confidentiality of the information you have to disclose for that application, which is your banking information and your routing information, the e-payments division of the Auditor's Office is who you would contact to get that set up.
Can you use 2 codes to identify your service in the system?
Yes, absolutely. When you are entering the commodity codes that describe your business within the vendor self-service portal, you can enter multiple commodity codes. And we want you to. We don't want you to only put one commodity code because we know chances are there are multiple commodity codes that accurately describe what you're in business to do. I'm not sure what the maximum amount of commodity codes is for the system, but I've seen vendors enter upward of 20 and 30.
Okay. Can out-of-state vendors apply for SWAM? If so, do we have to register with West Virginia Secretary of State?
Out-of-state vendors can apply for West Virginia SWAM certification. The way that West Virginia Code 58359 is written, there is no geographical limitation on the businesses that can apply for West Virginia SWAM certification. You would just have to meet the requirements of either small business status, women-owned business status, or minority-owned business status, or some combination of the three.
How can vendors expect to receive payment from agencies for services product received? How can they?
If I understand the question, they may receive payment via P-card payment, which is basically credit card for those not in government. It could be P-card payment. If you're set up that way, it could be EFT. It could be a check issued through the auditor and the treasurer's office.
We actually have in our terms and conditions all the forms except.
Yeah. So again, depending on the contract, the vendor, and the agency.
Yes.
A couple more questions have come in. We will do those and then wrap this up. An ARFQ does not have its March 11th bid posted yet, so is my 5 days being evaporated out the window?
Read that again.
An ARFQ does not have its March 11th bid posted yet, so are my 5 days being evaporated out the window?
How do we know that it's a March 11th date that hasn't been posted? I don't know.
Yeah, I think
what they're saying is they can't see their competitors' bids, so they don't know. Again, we don't post them at the central level.
There's no requirement of the agencies to post the bid. That's an agency
That's
delegated
right.
policy.
Yeah.
We do it, but there's no.
Reach out to your agency.
Yes.
Okay. Last question is a follow-up from the question about debt collection. How often are they reviewed for performance? Did you say 3 years? We don't want to miss any future opportunities.
The contracts are written for 1 year with 3 one-year renewals. Basically, it's upon mutual agreement, and they end every December 31st. Because I know that because they start January 1. So this current iteration of the contracts end December 31st. If there's no complaints, we would reach out to the vendor community and ask them if they want to exercise their next renewal period. If they say yes, we go ahead and execute a renewal. If they say no, we would then look at rebidding out the contract. We try to reach out to those vendors in the month of November in case they decide they don't want to do a contract, so we can at least get it published in enough time to award the next succession of contracts. Yeah. So basically, if you want to send me an email and ask me, 6 weeks prior to the expiration, if I have any knowledge, I'll tell you if we've reached out for a renewal or if we're looking at bidding.
Not a fair question off the top of my head, but do you know how many renewals are currently on that contract that are still
it's
open?
net 23, so I think we have 2 one-year renewals.
But you can view that contract on our website
on the
under the
website.
statewide contracts page.
And everything.
Yeah. So you can know how many renewals are available.
And if you go to the change order, the second page of that document will tell you how many renewals are left.
Okay, that wraps up the questions that we have. Again, we did record these. We recorded the entire session. We will get that posted in the next week or so on our vendor resource center on our website. And if anybody, Mark's contact information is there, and I'm available here. If anybody needs to reach out to me, if I don't have the answer, I will find someone who does. So, thanks, everybody. We really appreciate everybody's, again, we had a record number of vendors at this webinar, and we appreciate the 77 people who are still on. So, have a great rest of the day, and let us know if you need anything else.